The smell of caramelized sugar floated over the parking lot of Bluebell Creamery long before dawn. Inside the 30-year-old factory, fluorescent lights burned as bright as high noon, illuminating rows of stainless steel vats and a narrow corridor that led visitors into the public tasting room. Only once a year, the week after the first spring thaw, did the company open its doors to outsiders for the highly publicized ice cream flavor contest. Employees called it the Derby of Dairy. Thousands of recipe cards arrived from home cooks and hobbyists, but only 6 finalists earned an invitation to see their concoctions produced, plated, and judged on the factory floor. This year's panel of judges boasted Instagram influencers, a veteran pastry chef, 2 local journalists, and for the first time, a sherbet specialist, Dr. Gavin Seal, fresh from a research post in Bologna. Bluebell had never separated sherbet from ice cream categories, yet consumer demand for lighter, fruit-focused pints had skyrocketed, so the marketing department insisted on a dedicated expert. Flavor chemist Mark Frost, the factory's resident ice sage, would normally have been on the panel himself, but he'd volunteered to coordinate behind the scenes, eager for a break from the spotlight. Mark had auburn hair that curled at the ends when the air was humid, and eyes the unsettling blue of liquid nitrogen. He'd studied lactic fermentation at Cornell, learned cryogenic blending techniques in Denmark, and then moved to this sleepy Midwestern plant because he claimed the municipal water profile was perfectly mystical. Everyone around Bluebell agreed. If one wanted to understand taste, talk to Mark. If one wanted intrigue, watch him talk. 24 hours before the contest, the 6 finalist batches reached the final quality control phase. Mark supervised pasteurization temperatures, overrun ratios, sugar crystal sizes, and the delicate balance between stabilizers and emulsifiers. At 8:42 p.m., he signed off on the final forms, stretched his arms, and headed toward the staff lounge. He noticed Dr. Seal in a corner, hunched over a clipboard. "Big day tomorrow," Mark offered. "Oh, enormous," Seal replied in an accent that glided between Oxford and Naples. "I'm calibrating my palate. 1 extra pinch of citric acid can disqualify a sherbet for me." Mark laughed. "We'll have palate cleansers, state-of-the-art spoons, and a spit bucket per judge. You'll be fine." Dr. Seal forced a smile, but kept staring at the clipboard as though it concealed a deeper code. Mark chalked it up to professional nerves. Specialists often oversaw a niche field for so long that singular events felt like high drama. At 5:15 the next morning, production technician Marta Ruiz wheeled 2 pallets of frozen tubs toward the walk-in freezer marked Judging Samples. Company policy required dual entry. No one could step into a freezer alone. But morning shifts ran lean, and Marta had never been the rule-flouting type. The door clanged open, a burst of frost touched her cheeks, and she backed inside with the pallet jack. The moment she turned, her scream ricocheted off metal panels. Under a spastic flicker of fluorescent light stood Dr. Gavin Seal, frozen upright as if posing for a statue commission. His eyelashes and beard were frosted white. He clutched a stainless steel ice cream spade in one hand. A droplet of raspberry orange sherbet clung to its edge, still semi-liquid, refusing to freeze completely in the sub-zero air. The doctor's hazel eyes stared at Marta, wide and crystalline, no sign of typical freezer fog on his glasses. His lips were parted, mid-word or mid-breath. Marta stumbled backward, slipped on a patch of frost, and slammed into the shelving. 2-gallon tubs tumbled to the floor, cracking like eggs, crimson ripple across the concrete. Alarms blared, motion sensors triggered. By the time the plant manager arrived, employees blocked the freezer entrance in horrified silence. Mark Frost pushed through the crowd. "Let me see." He donned thermal gloves and a parka from the emergency rack. Technically, a chemist had no business inside an active crime scene, but in a place full of ice and valves, Mark was the unspoken authority. Inside, cold bit his lungs. He examined Seal. No signs of struggle, no bruises, no binding, just the unnatural stillness of a man flash-frozen upright. Mark's breath fogged. The sherbet drip fascinated him. Its refusal to solidify suggested unusual ingredients. 2 minutes later, plant security sealed the area and called both the local police and the county medical examiner. News vans would arrive within the hour. Bluebell's PR director already looked like she wanted to bury herself in a vat of rocky road. Lieutenant Dana Sorensen stepped onto the factory floor at 6:02 a.m., notebook ready, her expression neutral but eyes sharp. She briefly questioned everyone about their whereabouts between midnight and 5. No one reported seeing Dr. Seal after 10 p.m. when he'd returned to the on-site guest cottage. The external doors registered no forced entry, and the security cams, everywhere except inside the freezers, where wiring would freeze, showed only employees on shift. "Frost," Sorensen said, approaching Mark near the QC bench. "Care to be my sherbet, Watson?" Mark blinked. "I'm flattered, Lieutenant, but I'm hardly impartial. You're also the only person here who can tell sorbet from spackle at 5 paces. Stick close. Let's start with cause of death." The medical examiner eventually dislodged Dr. Seal's body, working heat guns to loosen his clothes. Early estimate, death by rapid hypothermia. Time of death, between 3 and 4 a.m., but internal temperature data would refine that. No defensive wounds. Blood toxicology pending. The spade he'd held was simply an industry-standard sample scoop. While law enforcement catalogued every freezer item, Sorensen tugged Mark aside. "Could someone be hiding drugs or poison in your fancy flavors?" Mark considered. "Unlikely. Everything passed spectrometry and microbe screens. I'd bet Seal sampled something exotic before entering that freezer." "Why enter at all?" "Maybe he needed silence to recalibrate those famous taste buds." Mark frowned. "But the policy is crystal. No single entry. Everyone knows the door locks magnetically if the latch isn't propped." Sorensen flipped pages in her notebook. So either someone lured him in and sealed it, or he went in voluntarily, and someone followed to trap him. Or, Mark added, he trapped himself, but that spade says otherwise. He intended to taste something. An hour later, Mark sneaked into his office, sat at his aromatics station, and vented into the voice note app on his phone. Hypothesis log. Sherbet scoop includes raspberry base plus, blood orange, but sugar ratio off. Lower freezing point, hence semi-liquid in freezer. Possible additive, glycerol or ethanol. He paused, inhaled deeply, then resumed. Search contest entries for raspberry-orange combos. The contest binder lay on his desk, 72 pages of forms. The only finalist featuring raspberry was a sorbet swirl called Crimson Carousel, created by a high school senior named Dylan Mercer. No orange in it, though. Mark tossed the binder aside. He needed a lab. Several freezers away from the crime scene sat the pilot plant, a mini production line filled with tabletop homogenizers and a 50-liter batch freezer. He charged inside, swabbed the spade's residue, legally questionable, but he doubted the cops would retrieve subtle sugar spectra anytime soon. Running a rapid GCMS test, he watched the peaks scroll onto the monitor. Citric acid, standard. Raspberry ketones, obvious. Orange terpenes, yes. But also, his pulse quickened, propylene glycol and dimethyl ether traces. The latter raised serious alarms. Dimethyl ether was used in some aerosol whipped creams as a propellant, although banned in Europe for such use, and when inhaled at high concentration, could induce rapid asphyxiation. Mark scribbled notes. Propylene glycol lowered freezing point. Combined with dimethyl ether, this mixture could stay slushy even in a deep freeze. More chilling, inhaling vapor during a taste test might cause confusion or unconsciousness. If Seal had tried to smell the sherbet, he could have blacked out in seconds. Falling victim to the cold, he froze before he hit the floor. Just then, the pilot plant door swung open. Communication Director Lily Chow stood half inside, cheeks blotched. "They've grounded the contest. Media's outside spinning rumors. Lily, do you have the contestant contact sheets?" She handed him a folder. "Journalists want statements by noon. I hope you know what you're doing." Mark barely heard her leave. He flipped to each finalist. Dylan Mercer, Natasha Bloom, twins Brooke and Brittany Holter, retired firefighter Carlos Sosa, vegan blogger Jenna Kwan, and corporate entrant Oliver Wainwright, a flavorist from a rival ice cream conglomerate who'd been allowed to compete as a publicity crossover. Oliver's concept, Citrus Requiem, a blood orange sherbet with a whisper of fennel and black salt. Mark circled the name. "Blood orange," he muttered. Oliver Wainwright was hardly a nobody. He'd appeared on Food TV, boasting he could design flavors that manipulated mood. His social media tagline read, "Ice cream is chemistry. Chemistry is persuasion." Mark sensed a half-friend, half-rival dynamic. They'd met at conferences, swapped trade gossip over lukewarm latte foam. Mark found Oliver near the marketing display of last year's champion flavor, chatting with Natasha. His blonde hair was impeccably parted, as always, and he wore a tailored lab coat monogrammed OW. When Mark approached, Oliver's smile lit up like a marquee. "Mark, horrific morning, isn't it? Poor Seal." Oliver shook his head with Broadway sorrow. "Can we talk in private?" Mark asked. Oliver looked intrigued. "Certainly." He excused himself from Natasha and followed Mark into an empty cold room kept at 40 degrees, cool enough to discourage prolonged conversation, perfect for quick confessions. Mark crossed his arms. "What kind of additives did you use in Citrus Requiem?" Oliver shrugged. "Industry secrets, but nothing lethal." "Propylene glycol? Dimethyl ether?" Mark shot back. Oliver's eyebrows lifted. "PG is common in low-sugar formulas, but DME, that's aerosol territory, mate. I design pints, not whipped cream." "Seal died holding a sample containing those compounds," Mark said. "Your formula matches the flavor and would remain semi-liquid below zero." "Explain." Oliver sighed, blowing a frosty plume. "Look, I pitched Citrus Requiem for shock value, but your QC flagged my propylene glycol level as borderline, so I reformulated. The batch produced yesterday is PG-free at your request. Check the logs." Mark had, in fact, signed off on the corrected formulation. He swallowed. But Seal obviously tasted something else. Oliver leaned closer. "You realize this makes your beloved factory look sloppy. Someone brewed an unauthorized batch after hours, else tampered with mine. I left at 10:30 p.m., had drinks with PR reps at the hotel bar, check cams." Mark rubbed his temples. Oliver's alibi sounded verifiable. The dimethyl ether still unsettled him, though. It required pressurized canisters not found on standard lines. Where would one store such canisters? In maintenance. Mark thanked Oliver and marched toward the engineering wing. The hallway reeked of machine grease and detergent. Inside maintenance storage, he scanned shelves until he found a half-empty box labelled DME Propellant, R&D Use Only. A clipboard log showed last checkout date, 2 days prior, signed by Carlos Sosa. Retired firefighter, finalist number 5. Carlos was in the courtyard, sipping coffee, staring at the pond where white ducks paddled oblivious of human drama. He looked up as Mark approached. "Need something, Chief?" "We keep dimethyl ether for soft-serve prototypes. Why'd you sign it out?" Carlos blinked. "Maintenance asked for extra solvent to clean sticky valves. I signed the sheet because my nephew Manny works nights here. He couldn't access the chemical cage on his badge, so he borrowed mine." Manny Ruiz, brother of Marta, the morning screamer, had recently transferred from sanitation to night shift. Manny's manager confirmed he'd clocked in 11 p.m. to 3 a.m., assigned to the CIP, clean-in-place system. That ended near the freezers at 2:45. Manny was still on site, awaiting detectives. Lieutenant Sorensen joined Mark outside the break room where Manny sat. She folded arms. "You digging where I'm digging?" "Manny had access to DME," Mark said. "But motive?" Sorensen nodded and pushed open the door. Manny, early 20s, looked like he hadn't slept in a decade. "I didn't kill anybody," he croaked. "I wasn't even inside the freezer." Sorensen sat opposite. "Explain the DME." Manny rubbed palms together. "Some lines get sugar-crusted. Engineers said DME helps dissolve the gummy mess. I used the canister, brought it back. That's all." "Did you speak with Dr. Seal?" "He asked me where the sherbet finalists were stored. Said he needed a taste. I told him Room B, marked judging samples. Then he asked if we made a blood orange sherbet besides the official batch." I shrugged. Mark leaned forward. "But why would he think there was another batch?" "I don't know. He said someone slipped a note under his cottage door, told him to sample the real winning flavor before dawn." Sorensen bristled. "Could we see the note?" "Cops found it in his jacket," Manny said. "Handwritten, plain paper." Mark's mind whirred. A secret note implied premeditation. Manny continued. "He thanked me and walked off, twirling a scoop. That's it. I mopped the floor and clocked out." Sorensen asked, "Did you see anyone else near the freezer?" "Yeah," Manny said slowly. "The purple hair lady, Jenna Kwan. She was checking labels inside a crate about 3:15. A vegan blogger sneaking around a dairy freezer." Mark's eyebrows rose. Jenna championed plant-based ice cream, claimed lactose would be obsolete by 2030. Her contest entry, Tropical Vegan Swirl, required coconut cream, processed on a separate line to avoid cross-contamination. They found Jenna in the visitor lounge composing a TikTok about industrial tragedies and ethical consumption. Sorensen confiscated her phone. "I didn't kill him," Jenna exclaimed. "I was verifying my pints weren't mixed with dairy. Cross-contamination ruins my brand." Mark asked, "Did you deliver a note to Dr. Seal?" "No. But I posted last night that the contest was rigged because Bluebell dismissed plant-based fans. Maybe someone wanted to frame me." Mark considered her temper, but doubted she had chemical expertise or access credentials. Still, she could have asked someone else. Back in his office, Mark laid out data like spilt sprinkles. 1. Victim lured via note suggesting secret flavor. 2. Dimethyl ether and propylene glycol used to create semi-liquid sherbet, lethal via inhalation. 3. Chemicals accessed via maintenance cage. 4. Sign out by Carlos Sosa at nephew Manny's request. 5. Manny directed Seal to freezer, possibly unwitting. 6. Jenna near scene, but no obvious chemical motive. 7. Oliver's rival formula originally used PG, but DME absent. He reopened the contest binder. Each finalist had provided supplemental data, except one, twins Brooke and Brittany Halter, entry Fairy Fizz Sherbet, described as raspberry orange soda pop with sparkles. He'd skimmed it quickly, charmed by their bubbly pitch. Their father owned a chain of craft soda shops. Carbonation in frozen desserts required high CO2 retention. To achieve that, one might use propylene glycol as a stabilizer and add pressurized gas via dimethyl ether canisters fitted with custom adapters. Mark's jaw set. Furthermore, Brooke interned last summer in Bluebell's R&D lab, granting her badge access. Mark hurried to security, pulled badge logs. Between 1:55 and 2:01 a.m., Brooke's ID entered R&D, maintenance, then freezer corridor B. Brittany's badge never scanned, perhaps because twins sometimes swapped IDs. The surveillance footage near maintenance revealed only a hooded figure, not enough to separate them. Lieutenant Sorensen listened, nodded. Let's have a chat with the Halter sisters. The twins sat at a picnic table behind the factory loading dock, legs swinging in sync, chewing bubble gum that matched their pastel hoodies. They looked startled by the approaching officers. Sorensen began gently. We need to ask about your movements overnight. Brooke's eyes darted. Brittany's remained fixed on the officer. We stayed at the hotel, Brittany said quickly. Asleep. Mark produced printouts of the badge logs. Brooke's face drained color. Fine, she said. I went inside. I left my lab notebook in R&D, so I grabbed it. With a pressurized canister in tow? Mark prompted. Brooke stammered. I tested a micro batch. I wanted more carbonation. It was harmless. Did you leave a note for Dr. Seal? Sorensen asked. She shook her head. Brittany's gum popped like a pistol. Sorensen turned to the quieter twin. How well do you two communicate? Brittany shrugged. We finish each other's sentences. That's twin rules. Mark's memory flashed to orientation day. It was Brittany who'd obsessed over Dr. Seal's scholarly articles, not Brooke. Brittany had been whispering about brand exposure through Sherbet's subculture blogs, but Brittany's badge never entered restricted areas, unless she'd used Brooke's ID. Mark squatted to eye level. Brittany, carbonation tastes dead in deep freeze. Seal would have criticized Fairy Fizz. That could ruin your launch. You needed him to taste a different version, one that stayed soft and fizzy, right? PG and DME accomplish this. Brittany's composure rippled. I didn't mean harm. I read papers on DME's safety for inhalation at low ppm. I thought the raspberry would mask any odor. Sorensen's voice hardened. You wrote the note, swapped IDs, accessed chemicals, doctored the sherbet, and lured him into the freezer. Why lock the door? Tears welled. I didn't lock it. I left before he arrived. I wedged the latch with a tub. Somebody must have kicked it out. Mark looked at Brooke. She exhaled, eyes glassy. I found the tub, thought someone was sloppy, so I closed the door. I didn't know. A silence swept through the loading dock, louder than compressors humming inside. After Miranda rights and lawyer calls, detectives pieced the timeline. Brittany, obsessed with hype and desperate for a flawless review, engineered the sherbet with PG and a trace of DME to maintain scoopability. She placed a handwritten note under Dr. Seal's door, claiming Bluebell suppressed artisanal integrity. She propped the freezer open with an empty tub so he could exit. Brooke, on a notebook retrieval errand, noticed the OSHA violation and dutifully sealed the door, unaware her twin's trick could kill. When Seal inhaled the DME fumes during a sniff test, he blacked out almost instantly. Unconscious, He never felt the cold that crystallized him. Epilogue. A week later, amid muted headlines, Bluebell Creamery resumed production. The contest was cancelled. The public demanded refund checks and answers. The Halter sisters faced charges ranging from involuntary manslaughter to reckless endangerment. Their father, in tearful interviews, urged parents to teach boundaries between ambition and ethics. In the windowless flavor lab, Mark Frost updated the safety protocols. Dual entry remained, but now freezer doors included motion sensors to trigger internal strobe lights if anyone stayed longer than 2 minutes. He also instituted a new rule. Finalists could no longer alter formulations after QC sign-off. Lieutenant Sorensen stopped by his office with a brown paper bag. Figured you deserved the first scoop of next season's contrition campaign. Inside sat a pint labelled Second Chances Sherbet. Blood orange, raspberry, but no propylene glycol or DME, just pure cane sugar and citrus zest. Mark grabbed 2 spoons from a drawer. "You know," he said, "I used to think ice cream solved problems. Now I know it simply reveals them." Sorensen clinked her spoon against his. "Here's to problems we can taste and fix before they freeze."